I am unashamed. What about you?
Welcome back to Unashamed. I'm in my new studio, Zach, and down here at the updated Southern Lair.
Yeah.
And I'm in a very tight space here. In fact, our new studio back home is much bigger and roomier. And I've noticed there's a lot of reasons for me to lose weight, but one of them is so I can get in and out of this studio because it's a bit of a tight squeeze. So we're going to work on that
I'm
this
glad
year as well.
You're able to talk about yourself in such a.
You know me, Jase. It's the one thing I am is thick-skinned and honest. So
we are thick-skinned, so you can save the comments that I'm not reading. So, as Maddie said, someone asked if you even like Zach. I was like, he's my cousin. I love him. We see eye to eye on a lot of things. But
you will call me fat, right? You will point out.
No, I didn't say that. But I hate to tell y'all this, boys. After because we do 2 podcasts in one day, and I'm still not clicking on all cylinders because I had this demonic force come in me. No, I'm not sure.
We're going to be talking about spiritual warfare today, so maybe
that's
you can
exactly right.
Well, I just had some exorcist style, and we had mentioned it on the
exorcise the demon.
Was Jase, the whole discussion you were given made me so glad that the Holy Spirit whisked me away like it did, so Philip and some of the early, because it whisked me away from West Monroe down here to the Southern Lair, so I would be nowhere near you with this demonic flu.
Well, it's not just Jase; it's the whole. It's honestly that whole area that you live in. It's that street. Yeah.
Zach. We live about a couple miles from a paper mill that is just. And look, I have no facts on this, so I mean, most of my friends work at the paper mill, so guess what? We'll die happy in the Lord. But it just seems like if you're pumping a lot of smoke and everybody's going, and it actually stinks, Like, well, I wonder why everybody's sick around here. I don't know. Maybe all that smoke I'm ingesting, but
and Jase, you and I are 50 years down the road from we were kids. Before they actually cleaned a lot of it up, because we can remember periods where the river would turn black.
Well, they dump They dump all the chemicals in the river. But I'll tell you what, I've been sick, really sick, twice in the last 8 months, and both of those experiences, the family of origin. And I mentioned this on a previous podcast. It was Willie and Corey, and so.
Well, you believe that? How can you prove it? See, let me go a different angle here.
Yeah.
Here's what I think happened. I think I'm trying to be grateful and thankful because that is part of our purpose. I believe 1 Thessalonians says, "Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances." And so on the previous podcast, look, I looked at what my dad's going through, and I thought, okay, so I threw up for 24 hours.
Could be worse.
I'm better, I mean, what? Yeah. And so here's what I think it was. I just went duck hunting for 60 days. And that sounds so much fun. There's a lot of work that goes on. It turns into a survival course. I mean, if you haven't noticed, because I probably don't think y'all would, I've lost weight. I mean, it was because I didn't have my dad there with me and I didn't realize how much work he actually does, him and his posse.
Yeah.
And so that kind of fell on me. Well, then we're training the Duck Boys at the same time. Well, I didn't sign up for that. Jay just had them lined up like, here are the new recruits. And
but I misunderstood, Jase, because I thought the Duck Boys, part of their job was to make that sort of job, your job, easier, that they were going to be the new labor force, the new posse.
That is true. However, that training, it's like when you see a drill sergeant, you think, boy, he's got a good job. Well, look at what he's having to do. He's working his butt off trying to get these young men whipped up into shape. I didn't realize how much work they're actually doing because I thought this is a challenge. And I will say this, not all the Duck Boys, one of the Duck Boys is 50 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's a perpetual adolescent.
Yeah, and I don't want to mention any names, but that's Jersey Joe. He had never duck hunted before he came down here. And
you're going to hurt his feelings, man.
No, I've already done that.
No, we're thinking in his skin.
Yeah, and well, it was so funny. I mean,
but he is doing the work. You got to admit. I mean, he's cooked quite a few meals. He's put the work in. I will say.
Well, our relationship got started as I did not volunteer for this job to train these men in the world of duck hunting. But when I go duck hunting, there's a lot of things that you have to do, and basically you have to embrace the process. I mean, I've given the Joe Paterno speech that Phil gave me many times when I was a kid. Y'all remember the Joe Paterno speech?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, when you shoot a bunch of ducks, you don't hoop and holler and act like that's never happened before.
Act like you've been there.
You've been there. Well, here was my problem. When I started giving that speech, I was getting a puzzled look from the duck boys. And I was like, what's the problem? And somebody said, who's Joe Paterno? Okay. So I realized there's a
generational gap.
Yeah, there's
your pop culture references aren't going to land. You're going to have to, So you got to get on TikTok, Jase. Get you a TikTok and start looking at what they're talking about. It'll help you connect with the kids, with the young people.
I'm going to have to reserve that to my.
See, you can only quote Nick Saban, Jase, when you're talking to this generation.
I don't do TikTok, nor have I ever been there, and I never got past the name and the origin.
Well, I got a question for you, Jase. Are these duck boys or buck boys or both? Because I'm confused. Zach, you saw a picture of the completion. They were sporting the deer that were killed, not the ducks. So I'm confused.
Whoever's mentoring them on the deer hunting is doing a fine job. I will tell you that.
Okay, now you've got the point of conflict. Everybody knows in our family, Willie is kind of in charge of the deer operation.
Yeah, buck commander.
I'm in charge of the duck operation.
Duck commander.
We put our money where our mouth is and bought the land with my dad with that in mind. You handle the deer, I handle the ducks. Well, there's a lot of differences in that. The obvious are, you look at Willie's body type and look at mine. Well, deer is an all-you-can-eat buffet. A duck is an appetizer. So, okay. Deer is easy.
Are you calling, hold on, just want to clarify. Are you calling Willie fat?
I'll stand by what I said. Deer is easy. And now people say, oh, what is Jay? Deer's easy? That's why Willie does it. You know what the number one prerequisite to being a great deer hunter is? What is the most important thing?
Being able to sit long time and be patient.
Bingo. Wow. Give him a prize. Let's see. Okay. So think about that. You're telling your friends and loved ones, you know what I'm really good at? Sitting on my butt for long periods of time, pulling a trigger with a scope that technology has gotten so far.
This is good. This is what you call clickbait content right here.
No, yeah. So now look, haven't said all that. I love to eat deer, and so I used to be a deer hunter. But
you think duck hunting is more sporty, is what I hear you saying.
No, I don't think it is. It is way more competitive. It brings way more out of you. It's a bigger challenge. These ducks are from Canada. They came from Canada. And you have to convince them that your painted pieces of plastic are real ducks with just a duck call and a presentation? Come on. Come on.
And I will say, Jase, to buttress your point, when you look at a deer stand, it's very man-made looking. I mean, you just go out there and set it down and it's there, whereas the duck blind has to be the most natural looking apparatus in the woods.
Now look, if you think I'm hating on deer, I love to eat deer. I may, in part of our arguments in our land, I don't know what you call it, partnership.
Your joint venture in the land.
Yeah, because it's a problem because these things keep coming up. The deer hunters, when they shoot a rifle, they flare off ducks. When I shoot a shotgun at ducks, deer just yawn. They don't care.
They don't even get up out of their bed. Yeah.
The most famous scene we ever had of all duck productions was when a deer crossed our duck hunting area. We had just shot 20 times at 2 down gadwalls. And 5 seconds later, a deer came out and said, "Hey, what's all that racket?" And my dad shot the deer. And he did the flip. Or we've talked about that many times.
And by the way, if you're new and listening and you hadn't listened, you can Google that because it's everywhere on the internet and watch it. The scene, one of those famous scenes in Duckmen lore.
Yeah. So they didn't like my deer hunting style because I didn't shoot big bucks because they're not as good to eat. I don't mind watching them. Oh, great. There's a big buck. What a beautiful creation from God. I'm not hating on it. Great. If you want to go out there and watch them. But if I'm all into table fare. The greatest deer you can eat is under 50 pounds. I don't have to take it to a processor. I can clean it myself. There's no tenderizer used. There's zero gaminess to it. You can salt brine if you want. You don't have to. You can just eat him right then, and it's spectacular. So that makes them nervous because they want to grow big deer. They don't like Jase shooting little deer. And they deem that they've convinced our kids that somehow or another that's not appropriate or sporty. I actually literally with one of the duck boys, his daughter, and I'm calling him a duck boy because his view on deer hunting caused him to be in that camp. Because his daughter, who's 9 years old, called me on the phone and said, "Mr. Jase, please quit shooting the little deer. Let them grow up." I thought, you've gotten your daughter to call me and tell me, he let her watch Bambi 3 times, and then she called me and was like, "Save the little deer." I was like, "No, little girl, I'm going to kill one just for you and eat it and think of you."
So was that extra calisthenics for that duck man?
Well, it was an argument, and I was like, "Hey, if you don't agree, that's one thing, but don't bring in the little kids and indoctrinate them in this false teaching that you're saying. I eat deer. We have plenty of them, and they're better to eat, and I'm going to do it." So, having said all that, I quit shooting little deer, and what they do is they say, "Just stay out of the deer hunting. We'll bring you a sacrificial deer lamb when you want it." So they bring me,
and they have to be fair.
And and it's cleaned. They bring me 2 or 3 yearlings a year, and I stay away. And what they do for me is they have to use a silencer or a bow, and it's been a pretty good deal. So they're deer hunting. I haven't deer hunted in 5 years.
So we've kind of produced this here in our opening discussion, this idea of 2 sides. I think maybe that's our perfect lead in to our guest that's about to come on. Except this is much more serious, the discussion. He's going to talk about 2 sides, good and evil. And so when we come back from our break, we'll introduce our guest we got coming on today. So it was a few years ago, Jase, I was coming out of ministry where I didn't make a lot of money, and I started making a little bit of money, got some good opportunities. The Lord opened some doors for me, and I found myself facing the A word, the word you don't want to face. Your accountant calls you and says, "We got an audit coming." Mm-hmm. So then all of a sudden I'm sideways with the IRS and not exactly sure what to do.
You need some help.
I needed some help.
And that's where our friends at Tax Network USA come into play. These guys are amazing. The problem is nobody really knows what their risk level is and if they're high enough to actually have an IRS agent show up at your home or, over some kind of unpaid tax or unfiled returns. It's a lot to keep up with, or so high that the IRS is about to freeze your bank accounts. But understanding your IRS risk level can help you decide how quickly you need to act. Take our advice and find out about your risk level by calling the experts at Tax Network USA. You can tell them about your situation, and they'll let you know if they believe your risk level is high, moderate, or low. It's free. to our audience, and it's 100% confidential. And if your risk is high, by the way, you're going to want to resolve your IRS problems, and Tax Network USA will do just that. Nobody knows the IRS better. In fact, Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line so that they know which agents to deal with and which ones to avoid. They've resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. So whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, their genius strategies are designed to quickly settle your tax problems. So discovering your current IRS risk level is fast, it's free, it's confidential, and it's the smart first step in solving your tax problems. So here's what you need to do. Call Tax Network USA at 1-800-958-1000. That's 1-800-958-1000, or you can go on the web and visit them at tnusa.com/unashamed. That's tnusa.com/unashamed.
Welcome back. We have been joined by an esteemed guest that we're super excited about, Jonathan Pokluda. We're going to call you JP,
That'll
Jonathan.
Work. That'll work.
Just because we shorten names. That's what we do. It's the Robertson way.
That's so much better than what Willie called me, so I appreciate it. I'm grateful.
So Willie, that was my next question, because I've seen you on Sadie's podcast. That's our sister podcast. But I was wondering your experiences with that wing of our family, because Willie is his own entity. But I was wondering if he'd given you a nickname, or probably nothing you can share on the podcast. But
no, I was sitting in staff. We have a staff meeting every Tuesday. We call it staff prayer, and I was sitting in there, and I got this just random text. It was like, "Hey, I heard your message of passion. You did a great job. Willie." And I never talked to Willie. I never met Willie or anything. And I just was like, and I looked at that and I was like, who is Willie? And that
you
and
just
I was
summed up my entire life.
This is my guy right here. Willie Robertson just texted me. I'm a big fan of the whole family. I'll be honest. I'm a day oneer. I'm an OG, way back fan. And, all the things. I'm in. I'm 100% in. And if you really want to make a young man's dream come true, like, let's get in a duck blind or something. I'm ready.
Well, Jase he's the guy now.
I've been doing a lot of that. We just, you probably didn't listen to our cold open, but there's a little bit of what is the word?
Animosity?
No, it's not animosity.
Conflict.
Tension.
Yeah.
Between the deer hunters and the duck hunters. And Willie's kind of the deer hunting aspect of our family. And I clearly laid out the sides. I'm the duck hunting. Duck hunting is way harder and more challenging. But it just causes a few problems because we're doing two things on one piece of property.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get these young men who we've been introduced to, and we're, it's not just about duck hunting versus deer hunting.
Yeah.
We're trying to turn them into Jesus men who are out there, showing some courage. So, the duck blind is a better setting because this was something I didn't say, but in the deer hunting world, they whisper. They're like, oh,
yeah.
It's kind of hard to have a conversation about Jesus when you're whispering. I'm more of let's shout it to the world.
Yeah. How have y'all taken to Christian? I mean, is he okay? Like, is he in the family?
Christian is one of the duck boys. He's come a long way since the beginning. He, on the first day, I guess I can share this. I mean, look, at this point, I've hurt all their feelings, so it's not going to get any worse.
Yeah, mine as well.
But we have a drill sergeant whose name is Jase. Al's
my
son-in-law. He organizes the duck boys. I don't actually do anything other than just when they show up, I'm like, you go here, you go there, don't do this, do this, and then I give them a long sermon about Jesus and family. But on the first day, the drill sergeant, Jay, had a impromptu meeting after the hunt. And he didn't mention any names, but I just remembered that Christian spent a lot of time on his phone while we were duck hunting.
Oh, wow.
And he realized that is a no-go. for future endeavors. It's like if we have to have a basket where you turn your phone in, because it's like you're missing the best part of what this offers. And I will admit, he's come a long way since then.
Like, get off TikTok, Christian. I've been training that young man, trying to get him in shape, and so we're just about there. We're just about there.
He's getting there. You've been very successful. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't really know all of this, but I know now it's out publicly about the Duck Dynasty, what do they call it, revival,
right?
Is a lot about what we're talking about, from what I gather, because it's a lot about the next generation, which includes those duck/buck boys. So I think that's kind of the undercurrent of the show. Zach, you may know more than me. A lot of people are asking about it. That's the reason I want to bring it on the podcast, because a lot of people are asking what's the show going to be about. But it's still, our family, but it's definitely that next generation, I think.
Round two.
Round two, exactly.
Oh, yeah, I actually talked to Willie about that last night. I actually talked to Willie last night for over an hour. So
whoa, that
just shows you, even though we have the reputation of not getting along, deep down he loves me.
Yes.
And so no, we had a good conversation. But I actually said that I was like, "Can we?" Because I've been everywhere I go, I've been seeing them around. It's an army of cameramen and different things. And he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna need you on some of this Duck Boy stuff. I heard that y'all." It's like a military training operation. I was like, "Well, Willie, deep down, we're trying to turn them into young disciples for the Lord." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I know. But we'll need to do some of that stuff." So I guess at some point.
I was wondering if they were going to bring the Grizzle veteran back in.
The Grizzle back in.
Well, I don't mind. I mean, I think it's a noble thing. I mean, these you got to remember, some young men they're in situations where they don't have older men talking to them about life. And, the duck blind is a perfect thing to do. And there's an element of danger, which I've always said, the most profound things and exciting things you can do, if there is an element of danger involved. Yeah. And that's been our big major thing, is safety. And because when you're in a duck blind, you're all together and you all have weapons. Well, these guns in close proximity, I mean, they're more than dangerous. They will kill you. People have accidents every year. So the first day, there was one of the duck boys shot across the blind. Like, we're in a two-way blind that there's like 5 men on one side and 5 on the other. And the end man, who was a duck boy, shot across the blind.
Come on, Christian.
Exactly. I wasn't going to say the name.
Unbelievable.
We had to have JP on to name names.
Yeah,
that's what I love.
JP's got an incredible ministry going on. I've been keeping up with what you're doing on Instagram, and you guys have been hitting these college campuses.
It's been wild.
I want to hear about this, because it looks like old school revivals, mass spontaneous baptisms, which is right up our alley on that.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear, like, what in the world is going on, man?
It's the craziest thing. So I got invited to speak at Auburn University, and the event was in 6 weeks, which, and not trying to big time anybody. I just usually have more of a heads up than that. And it was like, "Can you do this in 6 weeks?" I was like, "No, I can't do it." I mean, there's a process that goes in front of the elders and all that. I was like, can't do it in 6 weeks. And then a buddy of mine called and said, "Hey, this is my mother-in-law. Her husband's the coach, assistant coach there at Auburn. And, would you do that?" And I was like, "All right, I'll do it." And so we get on a plane, go over there, and I'm thinking I'm going to talk to 600 college students. That's just kind of what was in my head. And we got there, and they filled the basketball arena, and it was 6,000 college students. And she wanted this real specific message on sexual sin. It's a really hard message. And it's not a feel good message. And it's 1 Thessalonians 4. It ends with God is the avenger of such things. And so I'm like, teaching that and working in grace. And then Jenny went up after me, Jenny Allen. And so this woman, her name is Tanya Pruitt, and she had just been praying, like prayer walking this campus, just praying for revival, praying that the Holy Spirit would just do a work. And she just was so burdened by some of the stories she was hearing from these college students about their addiction and just being enslaved to sin. And so we, at the end of the night, we did an altar call, and this one college girl texted in and said, "Hey, I've never been baptized." And Jenny's on stage, just is so organic. She's just having a conversation with the crowd. It's like, "Hey, is there water nearby?" And they're like, "The Red Barn." And she's like, "All right, we're going to the Red Barn." And then we thought it was like across the street, but it was a half a mile away. And so we all just, thousands of us, walked out to the Red Barn, and we started doing baptisms, and 350 college students got baptized that night. And some of those were like 20-minute conversation. It wasn't just line up and dunk. It was like, man, let me make sure you understand Jesus died for your sins. God raised him from the dead. Just really clarifying the gospel. And so we were out till about 2 a.m. I mean, we came back after midnight and just kind of talked through everything. And it was amazing. And like, if that was it, it was like, that was one of the most fun nights I've ever had in my life. And we thought it was over. Well, then Alabama called, and then Tennessee, and then Georgia. And so we just started doing this SEC tour, and that has turned into, we've done 11 campuses, and they've all been kind of the same. I mean, different, but thousands come, thousands trust in Jesus, hundreds get baptized. Happens at every campus we've been to. And so it's really changed my life, because I pastor a church full time, and so have a staff and all that, and it really has changed my life and my job description and everything, trying to figure it out.
So I've been using Rocket Money, guys, for I guess the past couple months, and every time there's a abnormal charge on any of my credit cards or anything, it pops up on my phone, which is nice, because I've caught Jill spending some pretty big purchases lately.
I didn't know about this, but Lisa's the one that went and checked it out. But it was my grandkids that were spending the money. So either way, we had to figure out where it was coming from, and Rocket Money helped us find it.
Oh, that's awesome. I went and put all my stuff in there, and it actually showed me I had I don't know how many subscriptions that I was subscribing to that I didn't know I had. And some of them, I had certain services that I had subscribed to 3 times, the same exact service. I was like, what am I doing? So they can go in and cancel that for you. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, and it helps you lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. That's what we're using it for. Rocket Money Dashboard, it gives me a clear view of all of my expenses across all of my accounts. And I can create a personalized budget to help keep my spending on track. I can get alerts if bills increase or if prices increase or if there's unusual spending activity, as I just mentioned. Plus, the new goals feature automatically saves money for you. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you if you let them. They automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save, and then you can ask them to negotiate them for you, and they'll deal with the customer service so you don't have to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. That's $500 million, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. I can tell you that's worked for me, and I'm saving a lot of money by using this feature. I love this service. I've been using it here the last couple of months. It's been really good for our budgeting tool. If you're like me and you want to cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster, go with Rocket Money. You can go to rocketmoney.com/unashamed today. That's rocketmoney.com/unashamed. rocketmoney.com/unashamed. Have y'all kept it to God's chosen conference, the SEC? Have you gone out to the nations?
We're going to the nations. Like now we're reaching the lost.
There we go.
And
That's awesome.
It's true outreach now.
Did you start out, JP, in campus ministry?
No, young adult. So I was raised Catholic and didn't go to church in college. They say drug, sex, and rock and roll. It's kind of drug, sex, and hip hop in my case. And I was at a club 22 years ago, and someone invited me to church, and I sat in the back row, hungover, smelled like smoke from the night before, and started wrestling with what do I really believe about God? Because I've always said I was a Christian, but I was like, what are the odds I'd be born to the right country? And if I was born in India, I'd be Hindu. If I was born in China, I'd be Buddhist. If I was born in Israel, I'd be Jewish, and I just started wrestling with this. And so I started looking at world religions, the Hindu faith, the Buddhist faith, the Jewish faith, Islamic faith, Mormons, Jehovah's Witness, Church of Christian Science, Scientology. And I kept tripping over Jesus in history, that somehow 2,025 years ago, this carpenter born in Bethlehem reset the calendar. And, Bethlehem is a little bitty tiny town, smaller than West Monroe, that no one would have heard of except for Jesus was born there. And Nazareth is a city that we wouldn't know the name of except for Jesus lived there. So how did this guy become the single most polarizing character in the history of history? And I realized, in studying that it's because he died and showed back up 3 days later. And Paul says over 500 people saw him. And I'm a porn addict at the time, sex addict, drug user, and I've got you would have thought I had my act together, because I was trying to be a millionaire before I was 30, was chasing the dollar. It's kind of everything wrong with Dallas and a person. And I just realized, like, this guy paid for my sins. And if he paid for my sins, then I don't have to pay for my sins, and I don't, there's a lot of sins and I don't want to pay for them. And so if he paid for them, then, man, I'm just going to go all in with him. And then as I went all in with him, I thought, if this stuff is true and people can live forever, like, we're all going to die and we're going to be somewhere forever, I'm going to tell everybody. I've got to tell the whole world about this. And so then went into ministry 5 years later. And really was setting out chairs. No one was giving me a microphone like, hey, come speak. They were like, we don't trust him. We're not even sure he's saved. You can put chairs in a circle.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a little while and did some announcements. And then one Tuesday, actually, they were like, why don't you teach? It was a young adult ministry, and it grew to be the biggest in the country, and it's still rocking and rolling there. But then and then I became the pastor of that church that I just talked about, that I stumbled into hungover. And then 6 years ago, we moved to Waco.
Wow. That's amazing. And it reminds me a lot, Jase, when he was saying that, when Jason and I were interns right out of seminary, which I went into full-time work, Jason never did. But I would say our internship, Jase, the two things that we excelled at were chairs, how to set up chairs in different configurations, and also moving people. We could have started our own moving company out of our experiences for the church. But
what's weird is we both technically went into full-time ministry. I just didn't get paid for it, and which was,
and I just barely got paid for it. So
which
just
was
so we know.
Okay with me, because I had a similar experience, because you told that story, and what stood out to me, which is because I realize I beat to a different drum beat, but is some guy invited you to church at the club, and because that was kind of my role when I first got married. And you think, well, what does that have to do with being married? But I had shared Jesus with so many of my friends and people. I had just gone public for Jesus.
Yeah.
But nobody was responding, because it was kind of the same experience you had. They're like, you're just some wilderness guy. What do you know? And but the first guy that responded was actually one of my best friends from high school. That, it took him about 3 years to respond, but he did because I asked him to be a groomsman, and I asked him to be my best man at my wedding, and he was like, "Well, what happened to this? You shared Jesus because once I shared Jesus with him, we basically went two different directions." He was like, "No, I've got all these things I want to do," and it was pretty much the list you gave. But once he responded, it just started this firestorm of people coming. His friend got his friend got, and then his sister responded. And it literally, our first year of marriage, which was kind of terrible from a marriage standpoint, because I just was going so many places, even a couple of bars. I didn't go in them, but I was outside of them, inviting people, to come be a part of us. I just went crazy. I was young. And I realized then that whatever I do, I'm going to have to do it with my wife. Because she wanted to do that. Yeah. And Al mentioned your bio the way you described your wife, and I thought it was really profound. And it
was actually in the dedication in your latest book, which I want to talk about, something called "Your Story Has a Villain," and it struck me, JP, because me being a pastor for many years, and to be quite honest, struggled mightily in my early years, being more passionate about the bride of Christ than my own bride, and my kids, and kind of left them behind. But you said my wife Monica is a partner in ministry, And together, it says in the dedication, they discipling their 3 children, and then you list your children's names. And that struck me right off the bat as being a guy who's been in full-time ministry a long time, that one is your wife is right there with you in the ministry, but also your first job is to disciple your kids before you ever do anything about the kingdom.
But yeah, man, she's incredible. And you guys would love her, man. She's your people 100%. And she's from a small town around here. And so am I, born and raised in a small town, South Texas. And she just loves the fan. Like I love adventure and go and do, and I'm an extrovert. And she, like, her dream date night is just like a game night on the kitchen floor. And I'm, I want to go, I'll get the limo and 100 roses and write a song. And all of that's just lost on her. She's like, no, I don't want any of that. Like, I'll make dinner here and we'll just stay here. And why don't we play, go fish with the kids? And it's like, that's her dream evening. So she's awesome. And I couldn't do any of this without her. And in fact, where we have to be careful now is I want to make sure she misses me when I'm gone, because it's like, I'm going away. I'm doing these things. I'm just like, hey, babe, I'm coming back now. Okay. Don't you make sure you don't change the locks on me. But yeah, it's been sweet.
Yeah, your book on spiritual warfare, which, by the way, I think we probably get more questions about this topic than almost anything else that we talk about, which is kind of interesting because you mentioned in the book, about a lot of people don't even believe in the devil. They don't even believe in the spiritual realm,
right? Even
in the church.
Why don't we just give some pure talk about what pure talk is?
Because the name implies pure talk, correct?
Yeah. These guys are amazing. That's the first time I've ever gone after a sponsor and said, hey, because I'd already switched. I switched to Pure Talk because we had a little thing called a hurricane. All the cell phone coverage shut down. I moved coverages. These guys at Pure Talk, they've got the same, most dependable 5G network, same as the big guys, same towers, but only half the cost. You get unlimited talk, Jase, unlimited text, 5 gigs of data for only $25 a month. So the average family will save over $1,000 a year on their cell phone bill. It's why I switched. You can keep your phone number, you can keep your phone, or you can choose from the latest iPhones and Androids. I actually picked a new phone up, got the iPhone. Switching is very easy. I know because I did it. I'm now a proud Pure Talk customer. I love this company too because they are supportive of veterans. The CEO is a veteran who served a couple of tours in theater. They're really a wireless company that believes in creating American jobs. That's why their customer service department is in Covington, Georgia. So here's what you need to do. You need to go to puretalk.com/unashamed, and you guys will be able to save 50% off your first month. Make the switch today at puretalk.com/unashamed and join America's wireless company, Pure Talk. I was curious, with you coming out of kind of this revival ministry, did that play into kind of this, you wanting to dive into the spiritual realm?
No, it was in the works. And I think the Lord went before me because I got into this because I wanted to learn about it because I was, Catholic background. And then I got saved in a non-denominational church and we never really talked about angels and demons. And yes, like you have an enemy, like you're just, Satan this, Satan that. But I just, here was the deal. It was like this story. Somebody's like, hey, they got up, they got dressed. They're going to go to church for the first time in a while, Sunday morning. They plan to go. They're all in. And they got in their car and they turned the key and it goes click, 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 click. The battery's dead. And they're like, oh, man, spiritual warfare. Well, I'm like, what in the world did a demon do? Like, did it have to pop the hood? Did it leave the light on, leave the door open? Like, how many demons does it take to run a car battery? And then when you take your car in and they're like, oh, it's your alternator. Like, was that a plan for the past 6 months? Like, were they wearing down a wire? Like, what in the world can they do? And I realized, like, there's a whole lot of Christians out there completely okay with not knowing. And just kind of, as you heard my story, you realize, like, I'm kind of like doubting Thomas, it's like, I'm not okay. I want to know everything I can know. Like, I understand there's a mystery aspect of God and I respect and honor that. But if it's available to know, I'd like to know. And so as I started just researching, the Bible has more to say about spiritual warfare than it does about marriage. Yeah. Well, we're happy to teach about marriage and, give the tips and tricks in Ephesians 5 and Colossians 3 and 1 Peter 3. But there's this other thing of angels and demons, this war happening around us. And I'm just trying to figure out what happened to the car battery, And so that's really how this book was born. And that was before the Unite stuff happened. And I would just say, man, you got to be careful if you want to write a book on spiritual warfare, because the enemy just came out full force after I signed the contract for this one. But so did God. There were just blessings all over the place also, Unite being one of them.
Yeah, I just interacted recently with Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, and it was just eye-opening to think about there is a cosmic battle, and he talks about this Deuteronomy 32 worldview I think it's a little scary for us to dive into that, to think about. No, there's like an organized effort on both the side of Yahweh and on the side of this evil demonic realm. That's warring over the souls of human beings. That's a scary thought, but it's comforting too, as you just mentioned, that God shows up even more so. And the Bible says where sin increases, grace abounds all the more. And I just think, man, how amazing is our God that we can rest in that.
But it's even to that rise point, because you mentioned, and I had no idea, JP, that you were even a part. I had read about and seen some things about the Auburn deal because it had gone on for a while. And it's interesting because I first became aware of it out of negative. In other words, the coach had been involved, and so these people from DC had come in and said, "You can't be involved in these." And immediately there was this people wanting to shut this down and attack. And so I immediately thought, "Oh man, look at this! Somebody has had an organic situation where people have come to Christ in a college setting where we're always complaining about college kids and how they party and they do this, they do that, they destroy their future, and now we have this good thing happen." And all I'm seeing about it is this negative attack, on the badness of it. So it really just highlights, and I had no idea about the other campuses. So it kind of illustrates exactly what you talk about in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Heiser's, you mentioned him. He's another level. This book is kind of for, if you picked up Michael Heiser's book and then you set it back down, you're like, okay, that's deep waters. This is kind of a layman's guide to spiritual warfare. And so it's, it really was a 3-year learning journey for me of reading guys like him and others.
That's what I liked about it, though. We were kind of the first time. I think it's called "Seeing the Unseen" came out from Joe Beam. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but boy, it was like some of that I'd have to put down, thinking I don't know about that. It just took a real technical dive, which I love the book. But I thought, you had an interesting quote, which is a famous quote by C.S. Lewis in your book, that most people, let's face it, either detach. I think you had an ad or some poll that had come out that you mentioned. You can give the details on it because I can't remember, but I think it was like only 56% of, Jesus believing people believed in this spiritual warfare aspect in some capacity. Right. And so, the C.S. Lewis quote where either people are just like, it's not real, or they're on the other end, they take way too much interest in it, and which is the darkness in which they sometimes become, overcome by it. And I thought that was interesting because, at the end of the day, Jesus is the ultimate victory of this spiritual war. That's why he's so appealing. In your speech that you gave, you're like, he came down here to destroy the devil's work. Yeah. So I was just, I guess, curious about that, on how we need, to make this more of a conversation where it's not so awkward for people.
Yeah. C.S. Lewis says there's 2 mistakes we make about the devils. One is, being believing that they don't exist. The other is, believing that they are involved in everything that we do. I think there's a third mistake, which is believing that they exist and not caring. And it had, that belief, just this idea that there's a devil and he maybe devils, as C.S. Lewis says, and that just having no implications for our lives. And the reality is the spiritual is the eternal. And so the world is temporary. Like the world as we know it, at least, is temporary. The things that we love in the world is temporary. And so I think that's the battle is Satan is trying to keep us from having an intimate relationship, a deep closeness with God. That's what he started in the garden in Genesis chapter 3, and that is still what he's doing today. Is he's trying to prevent us from having a close relationship with God. So when somebody's listening right now or watching says, when I go to pray, I'm just so distracted. All these thoughts come into my mind with spiritual warfare. When I read the Bible, it just doesn't always make sense. The words, I'm like, oh man, I don't really know what I'm reading. My mind wanders. Well, that's spiritual warfare. He does not want you growing that relationship with God. What you see in the garden is Adam and Eve, they were able to commune with God and talk with him, and he talked back, and they heard him, and there was a relationship there. And then the serpent comes in between there and says, hey, God's trying to keep something from you. If you eat from this, you're going to be like him. And ultimately, when God comes up and he says, Adam, where are you? Well, God knows where Adam is. He's omnipotent. He knows everything. He knows Adam's mind. But when he says, where are you? It's not so much disappointment as much as it is distance. And then when we sin, we feel far from God. And so that's the feeling that we have whenever we sin. And so what's the solution? Again, spiritual warfare, it's confession, it's repentance. It's like, hey, I'm going to turn from this. I'm going to make it really difficult for me to continue in this sin. And so there's people watching and listening right now. There's some stuff that owns you. There's some things that you keep going back to like a dog to his vomit. And we've got to say, all right, this is the enemy. He's trying to lure me away and hinder me, because 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4 says that Satan is the god of this world, the lowercase g, god of this world. But 1 John chapter 4, verse 4 says, greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. And so I have everything that I need for victory. Satan's not afraid of me, but he's terrified of my God. He's terrified of my Jesus. So the solution is for me to remain close to Jesus and to foster my relationship with God and grow that relationship with God. And that's ultimately what's going to protect me from the enemy.
How much more effective is the evil one and the devils, if we don't even believe that they're there trying to deceive us, but we get into the deceit that what Adam and Eve were in, which is like I love that you mentioned that out of Genesis, that they ran and hid from God. I mean, that is what sin does, is it causes us to withdraw and to hide and to not be known. And I think about all my own anxieties in life and depressions and fears and just issues that have come up from this fear of being known. And what if I'm exposed? And then on the other side of that, because this is a spiritual warfare, that you have the Holy Spirit, who is guiding us into all truth and wants us to come out and to be known and to be seen by God and to be covered by him as God did in the garden. He slaughtered the animal,
That's right.
and made it a suitable covering for them. I think that's so important. What has been your reception with this? Because I guess the book just came out.
It just came out.
It's been out not that long, but I'm sure you shared advanced reader copies like you did with us, and maybe with some young people. What's been the reception as people have started to interact with it?
It's been really fun. I mean, probably the most significant work I've been a part of. This was my 6th book, but it debuted, top 50 on Amazon on all the books, which is, a milestone for me at least. And then people, I got an email or a text message rather this morning, just said, I started reading it last night. He goes, thanks a lot. I'm so tired today. I couldn't put it down until 3 a.m. And I think it's because, John 10:10 says that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come to have, to give life that they might, I've come for life so they might have it abundantly. And, there's a longing in all of our hearts for the abundant life that Jesus offers. And it's, I think that there's just people out there that think there's a bunch of church folks playing games and pretending to talk to this invisible deity and just going and feeling good. And hey, that's good. That works for you. You sing your feel good songs. It's like, no, man, there's a creator of the heavens and the earth, and you're going to face him. You're going to be with him forever. You're going to be somewhere forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And he wants to get his children back. And he lost his children to sin and death and disease. but he's gone to great lengths to get us back and allowing his one and only son, Jesus, to die for our sins and raise him from the dead. And there's an aspect to the spiritual war that's scary. I had in the book, I tell this crazy story of being in a country club and this guy just going wild on me, and I had never seen anything like that. I'd been in the Amazon jungle 3 times. I've been to Africa multiple times. I've been to Haiti 6 times, and I had never seen what was happening in this country club with this guy. And so I just think Satan's going to show up more and more. He's showing his hands as we're seeing revivals, as we're seeing college campuses and college students come into a relationship with Jesus, as we're seeing revivals in prison. I don't think the enemy's too happy about it. If we can get somebody to believe in the devil, then they're going to believe in God. And so I think he does his best work in hiding. It says that he masquerades like an angel of light. He's a deceiver. He hides. He tries to stay in the shadows and tries to just convince us that he's this spooky guy. But he's a fallen angel, and they're outnumbered 2 to 1. There's more heavenly angels than there are demonic demons.
Well, and I like the way that you really, and you said it earlier, you called it a layman's guide. The practicality of your book, JP, was so good and refreshing to me, because this is obviously a subject you can get into, and it almost feels out of reach to understand.
Right.
You mentioned John 10. You used the term pattern recognition.
Right.
And I really related to that as a pastor, because you were saying over the course of a couple of decades, you don't really have to look far to see the influence of evil.
Right.
You can see it in people's patterns and the lifestyle destruction that it causes in their lives. And so I think anybody can relate to that.
Yeah, man, that's true.
Yeah, I think it's helpful too, as you mentioned earlier. I think it's very, very helpful. I know the discussion of what we're having here, if there is a cosmic battle, if there is a spiritual realm, and there is spiritual warfare, like what is the war about? Like, because if we don't know what the war's about, then it's almost impossible. I mean, think about it. If we go to war as a country with somebody, we have no clue what we're fighting over. What's the win? What's the goal? What's the point? So I think what you said about earlier about God's presence, that is what the end of all this is. And I think it speaks to the soul of humanity. Like anybody listening to this podcast, whether you're 15 or 75 years old, you have a longing to be connected. You have a longing to be in unity with your Creator. Like we all long for that type of presence in our life. And it really is kind of this idea of intimacy that I think is seen in the Godhead, Father, Son, Holy Spirit living eternally together. It's just complete unity. And I think that's what the war is about, is that the devil wants to divide. He wants to destroy. He wants to separate. He wants to isolate. And you see that playing out in cultural battles. You see it. The end result, I always use it as a litmus test. How do I know if it's evil? What does it lead to? Isolation, separation, loneliness, and despair. If it does, I'm like, that's probably not from God.
Man, that'll preach. That'll preach. Yeah, no, he definitely. I think, Christianity is a communal religion. It's a communal faith. It's, and the greatest commandment is to love God and love people. Love Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And right now it's so popular not to. It's like, oh, I don't like people. Like, I don't want to be. And it's like, well, then you're not going to like Christianity. And I even think this is part of the appeal of Duck Dynasty and your family and just you guys doing life together and people watching from afar, and they long for that. I mean, there's people at home, they've lived in the same house for 27 years and they don't know their neighbor's name. Like they don't know the guy right next door to them. They don't know their name, and much less have their phone number or any way to get in contact with them. And so when you start seeing people do life on life, well, that's because we were made for that. Like Christianity is a team sport. We weren't made to go at this alone. And we've got to do life together. And yes, the enemy is constant. He's like a lion in the jungle that wants to isolate the gazelle. He's trying. He can't fight the whole herd of water buffalo, but he can get the one by itself, and they can maybe take it down. But he can't fight the herd. And he's constantly trying to isolate somebody to vaping, to cutting, to depression, despair, to suicide, to anxiety. That's his offense. And if you know that, it's art of war kind of stuff. It's like, wait, if I lean deeper into God's people and I have them, James 5:16, I confess stuff to him and have him pray for me, and I'm going to experience healing. And that's my story. And it's not just my story. I see it over and over and over again. So to your pattern recognition comment, it's like, yeah, it's like, here's the deal. There are things that you do where you fall into a pit, and there are things that you do where you find life. And you do the things that you fall into a pit, and you go deeper in the pit, and it doesn't work well for anybody. And you do the things that lead to life, and you find life, and you get laughter and joy, and it's just like, sometimes life is that simple. And I understand there's exceptions to that. I really do. I get that. But in the grand scheme of things, the 30,000 feet view is just like, man, walk in righteousness and do what God asks us to do. Do the right thing, no matter how difficult it is, and seek to know your Creator. And man, it for the most part, it's going to go well for you.
Well, it's a fantastic book. Your story has a villain. It's broken down simply, and yet, such a valuable type of who the villain is, what the villain does, how to fight back. We love it. We recommend it. Wherever you buy books, go check it out. Grab your copy. It's going to make your life better. JP, thanks for coming on the Unashamed podcast. You're welcome anytime to come and talk about anything you got going on.
Grateful for you, man. Grateful for your families. Blessings to you.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube. And be sure to click the little bell and choose all notifications to watch every episode.